Do you ever get that sense sometimes there's a kind of growing gap between you and your partner? It can be hard to explain it or put a finger on it. It's a kind of distant feeling. Well, feeling distant isn't that unusual in a relationship. You'll be surprised to hear because, well, relationships go through phases and sometimes that closeness fades for a variety of reasons. It could be stress, it could be significant life changes, or even just general routines. What's important here is recognizing the feeling itself or the feelings of what's going on and deciding how to address it with your partner. So join me as we dive into something that many men experience but often struggle to understand, feeling emotionally distant from your partner. Welcome to Man Talk, a podcast of real conversations about life, your life, our life, the emotional well-being of men. My name is Howard Todd-Collins. I'm a counselor in private practice, the director at Men and Relationships Counselling. So sit back, relax, join me wherever you are for this latest episode of Men Talk. Hello, hello, hello. I hope you are well wherever you are in the world. I'm always curious about where people are listening from. So if you do listen to this episode and you get a chance, just check me out on Instagram, Man Talk with Howard. Say hello and tell me where you're listening from. Where are you in the world? Now, I am, of course, coming to you live from Melbourne, Australia. I'm actually sitting in my home office right now. It's a very cold, windy June day, so it's winter over here. And I've moved rooms in terms of my podcast recording. I used to be working from a room near the beach in Hampton, not far from where I'm living, and unfortunately had to let that room go. I've moved recently, and I'm now recording to you live from my home office, which is fairly close by to a local airport and has lots of bird life. So you may hear the odd bird in the background or the odd plane going overhead. Hopefully that won't interrupt your listening too much. Let me share with you a story. Now, I met this bloke recently. Now, if you remember, part of the stories that I'm going to be sharing with you in this season 4 are about real people, real stories, real blokes and real couples and real women. But they are de-identified for good reason because I want to protect their confidentiality. So I'm going to introduce you to many characters in this season. They are all an amalgamation of real people, but of course, protecting their identity. So let me call this guy, let's call him Jack, okay? He's been married for about 8 years and has known his partner for about 15 years. And he came to me and started talking about what he felt was a growing distance from his relationship with her. Now, he couldn't quite pinpoint exactly what it was, but he noticed that they weren't talking as much and they were certainly not spending as much quality time together. So he was pretty confused, but is also quite worried that he was thinking maybe there is something wrong with his relationship. And he described a real range of feelings and emotions. Initially, he was quite confused. He noticed the small things first. He thought that his wife was less interested in him. It seemed that she was less interested in their usual conversations. And he certainly noticed that physical affection had decreased. Now, this confusion that he experienced also led to frustrations. He described it as being irritable and moody, but he also found himself wondering what had he done wrong, if there was an underlying issue with him that he wasn't aware of. He started to overthink every kind of interaction with his partner. He was also replaying conversations in his head, looking for signs that something was seriously wrong. And at night, when him and his partner would chat about the day, he began to become more aware of more silence. Somehow, this silence grew more pronounced. He began to kind of feel a sense of loss, even though there was nothing obviously wrong. He was experiencing a form of loss and he was missing the closeness that they once shared. And he found himself somewhat isolated, even when they were sitting in the same room together. So, this feeling of being lonely also manifests itself in more resentful feelings, more irritable. He was annoyed, he was angry, not outwardly, but he was certainly questioning whether his wife felt the same way, or if she'd even known that there was a distance going on without even realizing it. So, this feeling of isolation and confusion within this guy, Jack began to question his own sense of self worth, started doubting himself and feeling insecure about his own ability to be a good partner. And to some degree, these stressful thoughts began affecting his sleep. And of course, that changed his mood and he took that into his work life. And this all began to kind of spiral into his own anxiety about his relationship with his partner. Now, in the conversations Jack and I began to have, as we began to get to understanding more of the issues going on, that he was able to express himself really well with me, we kind of knew, and I kind of knew, that we needed to work out how to break this cycle. And Jack knew he needed to take some serious action. Now, Jack and I began talking over a period of time to look at how to address these issues or themes of emotional distance in his relationship. Now, if you can relate to even some of these experiences or some of his experiences, some of these steps may actually help you too. Now, the first thing that we began looking at was reflecting on some of the changes that have been going on. Now, this is really about, looking at when you start to feel the distance. If you can look back at time, that can be sometimes a specific event, or what is more often, it's hard to remember specifics when you look back in time sometimes. It could be just a gradual shift or a gradual change. But if you're able to identify some of the roots of what's going on here, it may help you to understand why. Now, for Jack in particular, he began looking back over the last, 5, 6, even 8 months or so, when he began to start taking on more responsibilities at work. And this extra responsibility, it was an extension of a job, left him with much less time and certainly less energy for his relationship. So he began reflecting on some of his thoughts and some of his feelings around this experience of the external demands that were going on in relationship to his work. He also shared a couple of things with some very close friends who he trusted, who helped him to get some perspective of what was going on. So if you consider what external pressures you may be going through that are also impacting your connection with your partner, have a think about what they are. It could be work stress. It could be issues with your own family. It could be health relationship related stuff. It could be, if you're a parent, it could be the demands of parenting. It could be a whole load of external factors. So if you can identify what they may be, it may give you some insight into how you're then coping or relating or disconnecting in your relationship with your partner. The second step, which sounds obvious and probably the most important, is to start talking with your partner, to have an open and honest conversation with them. Now, you can share what you're thinking and feeling, most importantly, without blaming or accusing. Now, the classic formula for owning your own thoughts or owning your own feelings is to use I statements. So you literally name what you're experiencing within yourself without blaming your partner. Now, with Jack, he sat down with his wife and he began talking. He basically said to her, "I've been feeling a bit distant. I've noticed the distance between you and I lately, and I really want to work on it together." Now, he was somewhat surprised to hear that she felt the same way, but also wasn't sure how to bring it up. So this kind of beginning of a conversation was really, really an important start. The other part of effective communication, by the way, is to be able to actively listen. when your partner is responding to you. So that involves listening without interrupting. So make sure you're present, no phones, no screens, no noise in the background. So you can still sort of really focus in on understanding your partner's experience as well. This can really help you to, create a dialogue where you're both feeling heard, but also feeling valued. The other part of communicating, of course, is when are you going to talk? There are some clear times in your life that you will know when talking about some bigger issues, when you're tired or distracted or you're stressed, just won't work. So try and talk with your partner about the best time to talk where you know you're not going to be interrupted. The other idea that certainly Jack and I talked about was re-engaging with activities that you share together. If you think about what you used to enjoy, have a think about whether you can re-engage or revisit this idea of doing things together that you used to do. It could be anything from walking together, cooking together, watching a movie together, something that helps you to rebuild that connection. Now, Jack and his wife began doing evening walks 3 or 4 times a week, which helped them to begin talking, but also reconnecting. Now, you may hear of these, ideas of doing date nights or weekend aways and so on to reignite the spark in your relationship. It's a great idea, but really the activities that you do together don't have to be elaborate. They don't have to be particularly expensive. The key is to spend quality time together, maybe just doing something that interests both of you to create the new memories. And most importantly, as I was saying before, put away your phones and focus on each other's company. The goal is to create some positive experiences that remind you why you are together. Now, I also want to share with you 3 more ways to handle emotional distance in your relationship. The final 3 steps in dealing with the experience of emotional distance in your relationship starts with what sounds like something that's somewhat counterintuitive to what I'm talking about. And that is about maintaining your individual identity. Now, while you're reconnecting with your partner, while you're making the steps to understanding how to spend more time together, overall, I think it's really important that you're maintaining your own interests and your own friendships. Now, the reason why this is important is it actually helps to prevent any kind of codependency or overly reliance on you and your partner for all your social needs and even all your intellectual needs. So the balance here is to get your perspective of your connection with your partner with your own individual pursuits and your own individual interests. Now, if you're able to find the balance, it's a really great way of increasing the strength and bond in your relationship, particularly because you can share and discuss what you're doing outside of just being a partner, not just your work life, but also your friendships, or if you're involved in extracurricular activities like fitness or sport, or if you're part of a group, or if you're studying something. So these are all parts of maintaining your individual identity as well. So have a think about that in your life in terms of the balance you have between connection with your partner and your own individual needs. The other step is about beginning to focus your attention on being appreciative and expressing that to your partner. Now, small acts of kindness, of acknowledging who they are, why you feel the way you feel about them, what you love about them, what you appreciate in them, is a really great step to bridge that kind of gap of emotional distance that can happen. So just have a think or a thought, or even consider writing down a kind of notes of what is it that you really appreciate about them, and start to share that with them daily if you can. Now, the final step, which is a big step, it's not for everybody, but there are some couples that really begin to feel the distance is just beginning to feel too big. It's really hard to deal with on your own. So what you can do is just consider seeking out professional help. There are many relationship therapists out there in the world. that they can provide lots of tools and a neutral perspective to help you to reconnect. Now, Jack and his wife, after the work Jack was doing with me, began to see another couples therapist, and they began to work together on more communication skills so they could actually understand each other's needs much better. So don't wait for the problems to become unmanageable before you seek out help. You know, on average, couples wait 7 to 8 years before they seek out help. Sometimes that can feel like it's just way too long, and sometimes it can be very difficult to get back the relationship that you want. So remember, seeking out help is a strength, not a weakness. If I can summarize something for you around emotional distance in your relationship, it doesn't mean that your relationship is doomed. It is a sign, of course, that there's some areas that need attention. And honestly, that is absolutely fine. The key is to acknowledge it and take some steps to address it. And we've just covered around about 6 steps for you to consider, to reflect on the changes that are going on in your relationship, your experience, but also to communicate and begin talking about this with your partner, to look at re-engaging with shared activities that you can do together more often, to seek out professional help if you need it. Most importantly, to keep that balance of your own individual identities and your connection as a couple, and to start being more mindful and acknowledging your feelings of gratitude and why you're with this person, why you're spending and sharing your life with them. Now, I would love to hear your thoughts about this. So again, let me know on Instagram, Man Talk with Howard. Now, if this episode sparks your interest, please check the show notes for how to access any more online programs that can actually help you make sense of your relationship. Thank you for listening. If you like what you hear, tell your mates, give me a review wherever you found the podcast, and I look forward to catching up with you again in the next episode of Man Talk.